Hello there and welcome to part 2 of 4 of my BattleTech Mercenary KickStarter review video. I've got an exciting one today because today we are going to be looking at vehicles, and this is the one that I've been looking forward to the most because it's the new thing, right? Like, we've had hundreds of mechs over the last few years from Catalyst. This is their first kind of dip into a real extensive project outside of mechs. Obviously, we've had things like battle armor before in terms of the elementals, but this is the first like real, say like an expansion into something that they've never done before. So how would they do it? You know, would it work? Is the quality going to be good? Is people still going to gravitate towards the metal models? Let's talk about it now, because I've just unboxed everything. I've got one of each like vehicle pack here in front of me, which I'll, like yesterday's format, I'll kind of show that to the camera when we get to them. And been through like all the cards, all that good stuff. Found some interesting things when I was kind of looking at the miniatures. So we'll discuss all that. The cards though, and this took me quite a while to sort out. So many of them are like from like later era models of a vehicle or like the clan variant. What I've done is I've hopefully organized it so that I've just got the base variant of the card showing. So when I review it, we can discuss like the stats of, again, the base variant. For some of the miniatures though, it was quite hard to ascertain because I couldn't actually work out which was the base variant. On most of them, it's just obvious because it will just give the name and say like tank, and they're like, okay, that's the one. Whereas some of them it will be like chemical weapon or something like that. So hopefully I've got that right, but there could be a couple that are just incorrect. So let's get into it anyway. We will start with the like odd one out in this pack, which is the BattleTech Objectives Battlefield Support. Something like that anyway. Basically the Objectives pack. I'm not going to show the box all the time. We'll just show it once because it's the same image on all these packs. It's a very nice image. It looks like Star League era of one Star League force or other getting ready to go to war. And nice packs as well because there's loads of like vehicles in and around that little diorama there. So very, very nice. Looks great as well. You know, just looks very epic, which is kind of what you're going for when you're playing with lots of like tanks and things like infantry on the table. So what do we get in here then? We get a mobile long tom, we get a mobile HQ, and we get the MASH truck, which is the mobile hospital. First up then, let's have a look at the mobile HQ. Not much to say on these really. They're basically just trucks. All of them are just a variant of like a wheeled vehicle. But they look really quite nice and sci-fi. You know, they've got like lots of wheels and radars, and there's like a little M laser on there as well. The stats on these are pretty irrelevant, to be honest, because they're not really meant as weapon dealings. They've got like special rules attached to them. So as you would expect, the mobile HQ has commander attached to it, which I have no idea what that does as of yet, because I've not read through the rule book, but we'll find out soon enough. No doubt at some point, if I might do some like, instead of playing with mechs on the table, I might do some like playtesting just using this new rule set using the vehicles, because it's a super quick game, right? Like you probably put like a company versus a company and be finished in like 25 minutes because it's really easy to blow things up. So I'll do that, and then I'll kind of work out what all these like special rules are, and I might come back and do a video on that if somebody's probably done a way better video on it than I could, but I might discuss it and give my thoughts on it and potential homebrews and things like that. So in terms of the mobile HQ's stats then, again, whatever that special ability will be is why you bring it to the table. It's very, very paper thin, so it blows up on a 7+. That's on 2d6, obviously. And if you're rolling 2d6, obviously 7 is the easiest thing to roll. So a roll above that, you've got a very high chance of blowing that up if you touch it. TMM of 2+, so not great protection on there. And it has got an M laser on, so it can protect itself to some extent. Just a regular M laser does 5 damage at range 369. So Very nice, great. Even if you don't want to use this as an actual thing on tabletop, they're wonderful little like terrain features to get, and nothing more so I think than the mobile HQ. Like you got that in like a cityscape or something, it just looks cool. Next up then we've got the mobile long tom, which is just a big artillery piece with a big old gun and like a little like ammo train there as well that kind of fits. It doesn't fit directly on the back of it, but you can like place them together. I don't play with artillery on tabletop like this, so this would always be a terrain feature for me. It's also got some like I don't know. There's like all these models have like little things on them that move around, which is really interesting. We'll talk about that when we get into the tanks and the vehicles. This looks like some kind of like strut. Don't know if that's meant to connect through. Maybe it's like, is it like an artillery feeding piece or something like that? I'm not too sure. But yeah, nice little like doodananny to that sits on this like ammo train. Anyway, the ammo train is actually, I think, as impressive as the artillery piece. It's got like loads of like little shells in there, so it looks very cool. Again, great like feature for terrain. I think I've got 2 of them. Yeah, I've got another objectives pack. So, you know, you could, if you're playing like capture the flag, and you can use like the artillery as like a feature for your units to go after. So it adds a hell of a lot of flavour. No special rules for this per se, other than it's an artillery piece. So either you'd be playing it within the game rules as artillery, in which case it's not very good at all in terms of its survivability. It's only got a check of 7 for damage, so it will blow up quite easily. So you'd really want this like at the back of the battlefield. For me though, I only use the battlefield support points. So again, I'd just be using this as like terrain features really. Then next up we've got the MASH truck. This has got the special of MASH, which I presume will be some kind of like healing system for, or you know, give some kind of advantage to infantry who are in and alongside this vehicle. It does have a weapon on it. It has a small laser, which is very, very small, and well, actually no, sorry, it has 2 S lasers on there, which you can see right at the front, and so it does 6 damage actually, but at range 1, 2, 3, so very much like a last resort. Interesting things on this. I think this is the nicest looking vehicle out of all the objective pieces here, and it's got a little like side hootenanny that sits like so, which is almost, oops, there you go, it's like a pull-out section for like triage or something like that. So a nice little feature that you can either like glue on, or you could just basically, you could keep it separate, and when the MASH truck is doing its MASH thing, you can basically just put that alongside it to to specify that is what it is doing. Love this model though. It looks like a little moon buggy or something. It's very, very fun. It's very, very like wide in the middle as well, which makes a lot of sense because you're going to need like doctors and nurses operating in there, so they need space to kind of walk around and do their healing gig. I love like the wheels as well at the front are like slightly offset, so it looks like it's kind of like moving over terrain, which is a nice little feature there. It gives it almost like a dynamic pose for a vehicle, which is, you know, quite unusual. Again, like all these pieces, it's not very crunchy. It blows on a 7+, TMM of +2. But yeah, it's not meant as an attack piece, obviously. But that's the objectives piece. I think that's fantastic. They're a lot bigger than I thought they'd be, which I like. I think it's just because of the way that they looked in the box, because it's in a much bigger box. You know, all the other vehicle pieces are 8 to a box. This is 4, so it just looked like 4 little pieces in this big box. But when you actually, you know, when I was showing it there, they look every bit as big and as on scale as the big tanks in this set. So let's get into the crux of it, and let's have a look at the stuff that will be thrown on tabletop to go and destroy your enemies. And first up, we'll have a look at the Battle and Fire Lances. So this is the set with the SRM carrier, the LRM carrier, the Manticore, and the Vedette, or the Vedette. I'm not sure how you exactly say that. I usually call it a Vedette, but I don't know if that's my Italian just mispronouncing that. But yeah, whatever. Anyway, so we can do actually SRM carrier and LRM carrier together because it's literally the same chassis. It's just got the different turret on there. So this is the SRM carrier, which looks a hell of a lot more threatening. Yeah, and that's the LRM carrier, which I always think looks a bit derpy because it's got this very long turret on there. They're both quite crunchy. Should say so. I didn't talk about the cost of like the mash truck and the mobile HQ and the mobile long tom. I will start talking about cost now though when we're doing these because it's quite important. And these are like predetermined rates that you can presumably you'll set down in a scenario to say to your opponent you can have a maximum of 250 support points. So for the SRM carrier they're quite expensive. They come in at 31 points. Again, there are other variants that are more expensive or cheaper, but 31 is quite expensive, especially given that it's got a 7 damage check. So if anything hits these, the chances are it will explode. But the damage ratio on the SRM is insanity. It does 10 times 5 damage, which is absolutely brutal. Pretty short range or medium range, it's a 369. But if you do get a chance, if that opportunity comes up where you can attack anything with one of these and it hits, it's goodnight Vienna. It will just tear anything on the tabletop apart. The LRM carrier, which is, in my opinion, significantly better than the SRM carrier, even though it looks a bit less threatening, that's because it hits at 7, 14, 21. It does 9 times 3 points of damage, which is still really good when you think about it. It's got exactly the same damage check of 7+, and they've both got the TMMs of +1 as well, so they don't move very quickly. This one costs 28, so it's 3 points lower, but you get the added advantage of being able to fire it from afar and not just have it like wantonly destroyed very, very easily by your opponent, because you know, the SRM carrier has to be up close and personal to do its thing, and it certainly won't probably get the opportunity to do that because it will get blown up very, very quickly. Although I suppose in BattleTech rule sets though, because we have that special rule set where even if you get blown up, you still get the chance to fire. If you do get the position, you can accept the thing getting destroyed if it means that you get to roll the dice to do that beautiful 10 times 5 points of damage. Though keep in mind that unlike like regular rules where you'd roll for every like SRM, in this you're just rolling once, right? So if you had to hit on a 9+, yeah, your percentages of doing that are quite low. So keep that in mind. This rule set absolutely nerfs all vehicles, but in my opinion makes the game actually quite a bit more interesting. One important other feature is that we get extra turrets for these SRM carriers, so you can, if you wish, turn them all into LRM carriers or all into SRM carriers. That's super useful. I think for me, I will be using them as they come out of the box because I've already assigned them to their relative forces, just have to obviously get them painted. I might actually use these as turrets, so I'll figure out a way to kind of put them on something, and then because we get the turret systems and game rules in this new Mercenaries box set, so I could say for instance that is a small turret and that is a medium turret, and I've actually got some large turrets back there, which they really are large as well, so I can just use those rule sets and potentially just proxy them into nice little terrain features for turrets. So would be interested in doing that, but I'll have to have a think about it because I'd need to get some like plinths to put them on or something, but discussion for another time. So that's the missile carriers. Next up then we've got the Vedette, or however you say this. This is just a regular old medium tank, but it looks very, very cool. It almost looks like the wrong way around for a tank because it's got like a protruding like central section. Usually on a tank, obviously, that's like inverse, right? So that's kind of sucked in, and then the two tracks run alongside. This one is different, but it looks very, very nice. It's a very quick little mech. It only comes in as a quick mech. It's a very quick little tank. It's 16 points, so really very cheap. I actually quite like this one. It's got clearly just got like one AC5 on there, right? And I think there might be another weapon on that. Actually, I think it might have like another laser on there. But obviously, as I discussed yesterday when we talked about that SM1 tank, they only use the big gun, right? So if this had like and if the ranges are like mismatched, so like an M laser does 369 range, the AC5 does 612/18, so they've just gone with the AC5 here. I actually don't mind it on this one because it's it's so cheap. It's 16 points. It's got a damage check of 8, so it's got a little bit more survivability than like the SRM carriers. Can hit from afar and does 5 damage. And 5 damage from afar, if you can get that into medium range, is in BattleTech. It's in Classic. Obviously, you're not going to take down like an Atlas with it or something, but it can just give you that little bit of extra oomph. And if you had like 2 or 3 vedettes or vedettes coming in from the flank and 2 of them hit, it's 10 damage. So for 16 points, and given it's got a little bit of survivability, and it only moves what's it got here, 5. Important to note there, the SRM carriers and the LRM carriers move 3, so they're super slow. This is tracked 5, so very much like an average speed, but the range kind of makes up for that a little bit. Next up then, we have got the Manticore, and the Manticore very much looks like a traditional tank. Actually looks like a tank that you'd see in the modern era, I think. It's got that like armour on the, I don't know, it's like this side wing armour on the turret, which looks modern, very modern, I'd say modern, like a tank that the US would make or something. Big old gun on there, lots of missiles. This is it's got a weird special. I've no idea what this is. It's IF1. To be continued. I don't have a clue what that means. I should talk about the specials actually, shouldn't I? So the LRM carrier has IF7. I'll have to come back and do a proper video on this rule set, because the specials I think will make or break some of the rationale behind taking some of these units. So I'll look into that. So we'll park that for the minute. In terms of its basics, it's got a movement of 4, but it's tracked. So that means tracked vehicles can obviously, as a tank can, they can get across most things, hard terrain features. TMM of 1, but it's got a damage check of 10. So it's a big old boy. It can take a punch, can the Manticore. Does a damage of 11, which I think's okay, actually. It's not actually too bad. Again, I'm presuming that they've just gone there for whatever the AC weapon is, presuming that's an AC-10, and then they've added in whatever factors for what look like an LRM-10 and an SRM-6, and they've just come up with 11, but it does hit at 6, 12, 18. So in a way, this one this busts the rule set of what we were talking about previously, because in this one they've used mismatched weapons and increased the damage a little bit, and then the range is that 6, 12, 18. So I don't know what algorithm they've used to kind of work this out, but it does seem to be quite contradictory in terms of like what I can see, but it still works. I mean, again, just for this being like a nice base rule set that's quite easy to understand, I think it's really nice to have for them to at least kind of acknowledge that it's got other weapon systems on there. I think putting it like at 10 damage wouldn't be too great, and that's a 21 point cost, which is actually really cheap. I mean, I really would struggle to justify like bringing an SRM carrier at 31 points, but 21 points for a Manticore, which hits at 6, 12, 18, it's survivable, and it's got damage 11. I think there's real value there, actually. One other thing to say, we can talk about this when we're looking at all the other tanks as well. The turrets actually all come off. Now, technically, if you wanted to, I could turn this into the Manticarrier, right? So I can put like an SRM turret on there, turn it into like a super SRM destroyer. So you could have all manner of fun with that on proxying things up. I won't be doing that, obviously. I only do cannon tabletop stuff, but you absolutely could do that and be quite fun. Like put like a giant turret on one of the smaller tanks. I don't know if you can do that. They don't look like universal turrets. Like some of them are obviously smaller than others, but I think just like on regular tanks, I'd bet that it's the same like turret system. Also nice as well that you can kind of spin them around. If I paint this, you probably have to glue it in, otherwise you might damage the paint job if somebody does turn it. But I'd probably set it. So like I might like have one Manticore like that, and then another Manticore like that, just to kind of give it a little bit of variety on tabletop. That is, I think that is a very, very nice set. I think it's very much made by the Manticore there. To me, is the standout model. I just love that armor on the turret there. It looks such like a classic modern tank as well. It's very, very nice. Right, next then, let's do, which is the one with the standard one that wasn't part of, I thought it was that one. No. Okay, sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. I'm just trying to do it so that I'll do the stretch goal ones last, because they're the weird and wonderful ones. We'll do kind of the core ones first, and I think this would be the assault and cavalry lances. This includes this is a big boy pack. This includes the Demolisher, the Shrek, the Pegasus, and the Condor. So we've got all kinds. We've got heavy stuff here. We've got hover. This, just looking at this looks pretty damn good. Let's do the Condor first, because I do love these hover tanks. They're so well done. Very flat. That's the first thing I'd note on it. It looks like a big pancake. Let's have a look here. These hover tanks, I mean, most of the hover tanks, as you would expect, are far less crunchy than regular tanks. You know, they don't have the armor levels, but they make up for it in, obviously, their speed. So this actually moves 8. That's 8 hexes, or if you're playing like on 3D terrain, you can just proxy that to 8 inches. Plus 3 TMM as well, which is really nice, but it only has a 7 check threshold, so this thing will die if you do not keep moving, but if you do keep moving, its survivability will go up considerably. Damage is 5-3, which is actually very, very decent. Range 369, and it only costs 20 points, so big fan of that. Not sure. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, I've got the wrong miniature there. Apologies. That is the Condor. They look very, very similar, though, to be fair. The Condor is... That looks like it's got dual M lasers and possibly... I don't know what the gun... It's definitely a gun. I presume it's like an AC-5, or it can't be an AC-10, right? Whatever. I mean, I don't know. 5 times 3 damage anyway. The card is correct, so it's just that I had the wrong model there. And that is... Yeah, I actually prefer that one to the... whatever the other... What was the other one? A Pegasus. This one is... it's quick. Range isn't great, but it doesn't technically need to be. This is like the quintessential like cavalry... hover vehicle, so it can get into position. It's got survivability because of its speed, and it does pretty decent levels of damage. You know, 15 level damage is pretty nasty for something that can survive and can probably shoot 3 to 5 times during the game. That's nice, and at 20 points comes in very, very welcome. The other one then, sorry, I've already showed this one, the Pegasus. Yeah. It looks quite similar, this one. I think this is actually objectively better, but I think the model is actually better on the Condor. Again, said he's a big flat pancake, this guy. Looks just like he is full to the brim of SRMs and like an M laser. Exactly the same stats as the Condor for movement, so it's an 8 hover plus 3 TMM, it's a 7 destruction damage check, whatever you want to say, but it's 7 times 3 for damage. That obviously comes in at 21, which is nice. That would make sense as well if it's got like a mixture of missiles and M lasers, because it is a 369. So very, very similar actually to the Condor. Costs 3 points more, so this costs 23. I think objectively, it's worth taking for that extra, what is it? You know, an extra 6 points of damage potentially, and it's got exactly the same stats. So it kind of makes it's kind of sad that they're in the same box, because the Pegasus kind of makes the Condor obsolete, and I think the Condor is a far cooler looking vehicle. But they are very similar. It's not a million miles away from like the SRM and the LRM carrier. Very nice. The the hover vehicles, to me, they are the standout good. Like I was looking at the Maxim yesterday. I thought the Maxim looked absolutely gorgeous as well. Let's have a look though at the two big lads. So first of all, we'll do the Shrek. This is such a weird and wonderful vehicle. 3 PPCs on there, which is an absolute mad lad of an armament. Devastating, the Shrek carrier, especially if you're playing them in like 30-25 era. They're very similar to something like the SRM or the LRM carriers in principle. Just bring all the guns to the battle. Little bit more durable than an SRM and an LRM carrier though, because they've got a damage check of 8. They still only move 3 though, and they've got a TMM of 1. So it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like an LRM carrier because the range is 6, 12, 18, and it does 10 times 3 damage, which is very, very good. You know, if you're hitting with this thing and it only costs 31 points, then your opponent's not going to like you. You know, I mean, if you can, you know, take just like 2 of these to the battle. If you start spamming them, you basically have like an awesome's worth of armament on the tabletop. Although they're obviously much, much easier to destroy than an awesome. And next up, we've got Mr. Chonk himself. Wow. Look at that. This is the Demolisher. Very famous tank in BattleTech. It's just got 2 AC-20s on there. And this guy, the only thing he looks like he demolishes is Cake. Absolute monster of a machine. Trying to think, the Shrek is kind of just as wide, really, but that turret is just an absolute... Oh, wow. Yeah, chonk galore. Really nice model, this. That turret is absolutely gorgeous. It's just so flat and intimidating with those 2 giant guns on there. In terms of its usefulness then, so very, very, very slow. It's a 3 movement, but it's tracked. TMM of 1, does a damage check of 9, which is, considering how slow it is and how many points this is, you probably would have liked it at 10, but there you go. This thing though, if this thing can hit you, 20 times 2 damage, and it comes in at 369 obviously, and it costs 33 points. So I think the Demolisher generally, I've played it a few times on tabletop, it's actually quite useless because the mechs are usually so quick that it can just basically outpace it and, you know, destroy it quite easily. But you've got to kind of use the right mech to go after it. You don't want something that has to go like toe to toe with it, because 2 AC-20s, you know, up your cockpit, so to speak, will not, you know, it can be absolutely devastating. All kinds of like PSR checks and everything else. So be very, very careful if you see them on tabletop, but you've just got to kind of know how to game them and play them. I think they're more like, it's almost like the Hunchback of vehicles, mechs that aren't really that good, even though I'm wearing one today, Mr. Hunchback. But they're much more threatening. They're like a psychological torment as opposed to something that's going to make an effective difference on tabletop. So next up then we'll do the final of the standard packs before we do the 2 like additional packs we got. And I think this is my favourite set here. This is the Recon and Hunter Lance. This contains the Behemoth, the Ontos, the Skulker, and of course the Warrior Attack Helicopter. So let's do the Skulker first, because he's a Skulker and he's tiny. Again, looks quite a bit like the Mobile HQ. You kind of put those up in comparison. It's got a similar kind of like wheel system, and it's got like a mini radar on there. So it's like these 2 could go out as like, you know, father and son or something on the battlefield. It's very much just a scout tank, so it's there to, you know, it can do like spotting for you or see where your opponent is, good things like that. It's got a 1 medium laser on there, so it can defend itself. It's a 369. It's got a damage check of 7, but it's quite wick, which is Scottish or English for quick, wick. And it moves at 7. It is wheeled though, and wheeled is the not great one. And a TMM of 3+. So it's got survivability in its speed, but you're really only going to be using this for like spotting for artillery and things of that nature. 14 points, which is probably quite fair. I mean, it's no worse than... It's like a very, very bog standard vehicle, right? Do a little bit of damage, it's quite quick, and it's got average range. So it's a very, very average vehicle. So I think 14 is quite a fair cost for this. Next up then, we've got the Ontos. This guy's a little bit of a monster. A bit like the Demolisher, but far more interesting weapon setup. So he comes in... Again, most of these tanks are, as you would expect, very slow. So it's a 3 movement point track. TMM of +1. It's a damage check of 9. So very, very similar to a Demolisher in a lot of ways. 9 times 4 damage, which is good. It's basically like an M laser spam, and it's got, I think, an LRM-10 on there as well. Though the LRM-10 I don't think is necessarily represented on here, given how they've kind of worked out the damage systems. 32 points. Don't think I'm very impressed by this guy actually in terms of this rule set. Actually, I think the Ontos, when it's got like 8 M lasers, bringing that to bear on tabletop is devastating in classic, or can be. But for this gaming system, it's quite meh. You say that if you don't want to get too close to it. If it does give you a personal light show, you're going to bring a lot of trouble. 9 times 4 damage is, what's that? 36 points of damage is nothing to laugh about. That will hurt you a lot. But I just think I'd like the damage up to like 10, but obviously it's not the case here. It's not one of the big heavier tanks. It's just it's an armored vehicle basically. It is a tank. It's just one of the it's not the what we were looking at previously, the Manticore, which is clearly like a proper tank with proper levels of armour on there. I think it was, the Manticore. It's got the 10 damage checker on there. So pretty average, but it would be worth taking. Again, it's one of those that has more of a psychological impact on your opponent than anything else. 32 points as well. That's really expensive. Might have to give that one a miss. Next up then, we've got the ultimate in just big boy guns. Like the Demolisher, that obviously has massive weapons on there, but they're very like deep set on the actual vehicle. This one has just got them like protruding out like nobody's business. Just 2 ginormous guns. This is obviously the Behemoth. Unbelievably slow. It has a movement point of 2 tracked. And no TMM, so it doesn't matter if you can literally stay still with this thing. It won't make a difference. Advantageous to stay still because then you won't have any penalties to your movement when you're trying to hit. It's a 10+ though when it comes to damaging it. So it's basically survivability is all based around its armour and nothing to do with its speed. Damage 10 times 3, that's good. And a range of 5, 10, 15. That makes up actually for it being slow, especially if you're playing just like on a regular like classic hex map. 32 points. This for me is the standout. Between that and the Ontos, I'd take this every day of the week. Exactly the same points, just way better, in my opinion. In terms of this rule set, I think if you're dealing with like actual classic, you'd probably say the Ontos is considerably better because it's got that M laser spam. So you basically got 8 M lasers to throw on the field, which is very, very good. And finally, then we have got the thing that I've been most looking forward to, I think, in this Kickstarter, and that is the Warrior Attack Helicopter. This is beautiful. I knew it was beautiful anyway. I'd seen, a couple of the earlier, I'd seen people like post photos of it. It's so unbelievably needed, desperately important. I think that we got an attack helicopter in plastic. They're very popular on tabletop. They look fantastic, when they're kind of flying across the battlefield. It's very like thematic and interesting and fun. A word on this stand here. They've done something really good. So you get like a little nub that you can just place the helicopter into. So if you really wanted to, you could buy some of these and just use them as like terrain features at an airport. So that in itself looks fantastic. What you can do, and certainly what I will be doing with them though, is take that little nub out and put in the put the transparent like stand in there, and then you can put that into the hex point, and then you've got a flying helicopter on BattleTop and tabletop, which is very, very nice. Really like this stand as well. It's very thick and there's no bubble damage in there. You find that a lot on these transparent things. I've got that with loads of Games Workshop stuff where, you know, the whole point of these transparent stands is that you can't see them, right? Or you should see right through them, which makes the like illusion on tabletop that they're flying. If they're just like lots of bubbles in there, it kind of defeats the point of it looking transparent. So good job on that CGL, because I've looked at a few of these now and none of them look to have any bubble damage on there. So whoever's making these for you did a damn good job. In terms of the attack helicopter, and I did discuss this I think yesterday when I'd taken out the card in the Mercenaries box set. It's a 9 movement VTOL, so it's the quickest thing you'll find. It's TMM +4, damage check of 5. Now that's to represent it's a VTOL, so if it gets hit by anything and it's like, you know, the like rotary blades get hit, it's just going to crash, right? Like that's a VTOL. Damage of 2, which is shockingly bad, especially given that it has actually got SRMs on there as well, but again, such as the design of this the weapon system in this gaming system. It's an 8, 16, 12, and it costs 12 points. So 12 points, I think it's the cheapest thing we've seen thus far. It's 2 points cheaper than this Skulker. Again, you can use it for scouting, you can use it for spotting. You can, like I said yesterday, you can use it to kind of just get that extra tiny bit of damage that you need to give something a PSR check or do like an armor hit from behind, or sorry, a hit on a mech from behind, because you'll absolutely be able to do this with these because they are so quick and they can fly over all the terrain and the mechs and everything else. If it does get hit though, you die. It's dead. That's it. I mean, 5+, I mean, yeah, you're done for. But at 9 movement and a +4 TMM is good, right? Like it's going to be, you're going to need a damn good, you're going to need like Natasha Kerensky to start dropping these out of the sky. But if you are like, if your opponent is not going to see them as a threat beyond like spotting or maybe objective capture, if you're playing that a VTOL can capture objectives. But yeah, to me, standout, good, amazing. I'm so glad. I mean, as well, like you can proxy these quite easily because they're quite generic helicopters. So you could, there are dozens of different helicopter types in BattleTech, so you could literally start to kind of chop and change it and put your own weapon systems on there and use these as different VTOLs. So yeah, just great that we're getting them in plastic. Far, far superior to the old metal ones, which were significantly smaller than that, and they just didn't work. Like the rotary blades on my old metal models always get damaged. They bend really easily. They're just a bit of a nightmare. I will be keeping them, but I'm going to use them all as like generic transport helicopters or like civilian helicopters. I certainly don't want them. That looks like a proper like Vietnam level attack helicopter. Like you could see that flying across Hanoi or something. It just looks the part. So 2 more to go. This is good. We've only been going for 40 minutes, so it should be another maybe 10-15 minutes. I'm trying to keep these under an hour. Let's do you first. These are the 2 that came on the stretch goals. So this is the Rifle and Command Lance. And this has a whole array of different and interesting units in here. So let's do the... Oh, well, I'll actually tell you first. So there is the Hetzer, the von Luckner, the Sturmfuhrer, and the Bulldog. A very, very German-sounding set, this, apart from the Bulldog, which is like the Winston Churchill thing. So a bit of the odd one out, the Bulldog there. Everything else is very, very German. Let's have a look at the Bulldog first of all. Ooh, Interesting. Okay, so the Bulldog's always been quite a fascinating little vehicle because it doesn't really have a turret. It just has like a big nub on there. You can see it's like a flat nub, which is I think it's an L laser. I think, yeah, it must be an L laser. And it's just an interesting turret. It's slightly derpy, but interesting. And yeah, I like it. I mean, it's similar to like the Vedetti that we were looking at earlier. You know, it's got like, it's not the most durable tank by any stretch, but it's got a little bit of, it's not a speed demon by any stretch, but it's not like the, you know, some of the tanks we're looking at, which is like 2 or 3. In fact, it's a 4-track movement with a +1 TMM, and it's got an 8 check. So really not very durable at all, but it does have a damage of 9 at 5, 10, 15 range, and I think that gives it a bit of credence. 16 points as well, so really quite cheap. I mean, same price as was the Skulker 14 points, I think, and this is 16. I think so. Can't remember, but yeah, whatever. So pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. Like, I'd much rather take like a Bulldog than the SRM carrier, personally, just because that extra bit of range and that extra bit of durability means that you can fire in and position it with a little bit more, you know, like ability to do what it needs to do for you, as opposed to an SRM that your opponent's just going to wreck like immediately. So this is like half the cost of an SRM, so you can basically get 2 Bulldogs for it, and I'd every day of the week opt for 2 Bulldogs as opposed to 1 SRM carrier. Next up then, we have got the Von Luckner. I'm going to have to stop doing that quite offensive German accent. I know I have German listeners, I'm sure you don't mind. Maybe. So the Von Luckner, this is the one I really struggle to find like the vanilla variant of this. So the cards just don't make it clear. They just give lots of different variants. It doesn't kind of tell you which the standard one is. Like, it doesn't just say heavy tank. So I'm going to go with this one. This is the VNL-K75N. 35 points, so quite expensive. Let's see if it holds up. First point to note is it's a lovely looking boy. I think it might be my favourite tank in, like, you know, in terms of the tanky stuff on here. It's got, as much as I love the Manticore, thought that looked like a very modern tank, this looks just like a big beast of a boy. It does, you know, you could see this on like a modern battlefield as well. It's got, again, that like really kind of interesting turret with that, like, obviously on tanks, right? Like not that I'm a military expert by any stretch, but you want to have like the diagonal armor, right? Like, you don't want things hitting at it full on, like flat surface on shell. If it's like this, then the ordnance can like skim off it. It doesn't do as much damage. So I really like that all these tanks have got that like feature on there. They've got that, like, I don't know the technical term. It's like a asymmetrical, if that's even a word. It doesn't look like, you know, like in the old metal models, because it's metal, it looks very like straight on and square. In these, they've really kind of designed it with actual like survivability in mind, which I really do appreciate. I think it's a really nice little feature. Certainly not asymmetrical. I think asymmetrical warfare, that's something, isn't it? Asymmetrical, not relevant to this. It's just like someone will tell me in the comments. Someone's probably a tank geek. I'm not, as you can tell. This then, let's have a look at its stats. So as I said, it's 35 points, 3-track, which is pretty standard for a big heavy tank. TMM of 1, damage check of 10, very nice. 20 times 2 damage, so it does exactly the same damage as the Demolisher, although that's set up differently, right? So that's like a mixture of like SRMs, there's some LRMs on there, there's some rear weaponry. It looks like it's got an LRM-10 on the rear, and it's got that, presuming that's an AC-20, it's got to be an AC-20, right? So they've boiled it down, I think, anyway. If this is the like vanilla variant of it, 20 times 2 damage, so it's as much damage as a Demolisher. And it's exactly the same as the Demolisher, actually. It's a 369 as well. For me, though, considerably stronger than the Demolisher because of that 10 check, that damage check. Moves the same. Yeah, it's basically like the Demolisher's granddad, right? Like he's a bit more gnarly and a bit more vicious. And I think if you were playing like classic rules with this, it would be far, far better than Demolisher because it's got lots of different ranged weapons on there and it's clearly got like good armor levels. Then we've got the Sturmfeuer. This is a really interesting one. I don't know if you can see on the card, it says horse. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if it'll zoom in. On like where the missile doors open, it just says horse, which I quite like. Not on the miniature, that's important to add. Someone's actually just like, written that on the digital image. This is a very expensive vehicle, 37 points, so I think that might be the most expensive vehicle we've looked at, I think. Must be, right? I think even like the SRM carrier was what, like 32? I'm seeing there the Behemoth was 32. Let's see if it justifies that then. So it's a 3-track with a plus TMM. It's a 12 damage check. Wow. So yeah, box carts to blow this thing up. Although, and I'll go through this how this damage system works at some point, that can lower itself. But we won't get into that now. One, because I can't remember because it's months ago that I looked at this and played a version of it. And two, I don't want to give any bad intel, but that's not to say it's not just that you have to roll box tarts to blow this thing up. That would be ridiculous. So super powerful or durable. It's got a damage of 8 times 3, so its damage is pretty light actually in the grand scheme of things, but who cares when it will not go away? It's just so big. And it's got a range, this is the very nice thing, it's got a range of 7, 14, 21. So presuming it's just kind of maxed out there with LRMs, and they're just called all in that that housing in where it says horse. I think that might be it's 37 points, so you pay for it. But my goodness, yeah, you could literally, and it's pretty quick for a big heavy tank as well. It can move 3 at tracked. You could just like park that at the back of the battlefield and just wreck things, and if anyone comes near you, you're just surviving because of that armor. I think that's probably the crunchiest vehicle we've come across thus far, especially with that 8 times 3 damage. I mean, if the only problem is with these vehicles to some extent is the generic skill is 6, so you're always going to be hitting probably on like a 10 plus. If you're lucky, if you're going against a quick map, you might be hitting on 11 or 12, so you might not be able to hit at all, especially if you're hitting at range. But this thing, because it can actually move a little bit, you could actually change that long range into medium range after a couple of turns, and you wouldn't worry, because you wouldn't be like, well, okay, it's like an LRM carrier that's like soft as butter. This thing will last. It is durable. So, big fan of the Sturmfeuer. And the model as well. The model, I love the more interesting variants of these models. So the ones that, like the Bulldog, which has got that weird nub L laser on there. I like things that look a little bit derpy and a bit different. Speaking of derpy and different, the Herzer. This is the Herzer. It's basically just like I don't know. It looks like a golf cart with a ginormous turret on it. It's possibly the stupidest vehicle in all of BattleTech. There are some very stupid vehicles in BattleTech, thinking of like the Saladin tank, which is particularly weird. Same principle, it's just a giant AC-20 on a hovercraft. But this is wheeled, so obviously not as good. 19 points, so it's... I'm probably not going to like this one, am I? Yes, 19 points. 4 wheeled, which isn't great, plus TMM of +1. It's got a damage check of 8, which is actually better than I thought it would be. I thought that would be a 7. Damage just 20, because it's just got one big AC-20 on there, and it's range 369. Do I like that then? I think very meh, really. I mean, it would be quite fun just to torment your opposition with a wheeled AC-20, just like it's there. You have to acknowledge how stupid this thing is. But no, I don't think this works for me. Not quick enough. damage check is just about okay. If it was a 7 and this thing was like 14 points, I'd probably be happier with that. I'd be like, well, you can just bring 2 and accept that one of them's going to die very, very quickly and then the other one might get a shot off and do 20 points of damage. But with this thing, you've always got to remember with this new vehicle system that skill set, the skill point, the fact that all the regular pilots and drivers and everything else is 6 does make a difference, because even if you get the up close and personal, it's going to be difficult for you to even make the shot. So 19 points, similar to like the SRM6. Like, if you can do it, it's beautiful. But are you going to do it? No, probably not. You might do. I mean, you might be playing against an opponent who is, I don't know, they're kind of running for objectives or they're not thinking straight or something like that, and you might look out. But for me, very difficult. And then finally, final catch of the day, we have got the Heavy Battle and Sweep Lances box set. This is, again, I'm pretty sure that this one and the previous one were the 2 stretch goal ones. This contains the Patton tank, the Pike, the J. Edgar and the Drillson, and I really, really like this. This has got some nice hover tanks in there and some interesting tanks. Let's have a look then at the Pike first, because this is a fascinating little vehicle. It's so weird. It's basically like a walking AC turret spam, a rolling AC2. Just what I don't know. It's an AC2 turret spam. There you go. That's the one. It's 17 points, so super cheap, as it probably should be, because I think you can guess it's probably not going to be very good. It's a 3-tracked +1 TMM, but miraculously, and I don't know how it justifies this, it's a 9 damage check, so it's got some really decent armour on there. It's like as armoured as like a demolisher, so like, yeah, interesting. It's one of those things though that it's like an armadillo or something. It's like very big and armoured and difficult to do anything to, but it's got a damage of 6, and obviously that's not great. So the one thing that makes up for that, because they're AC2s, it hits at 8, 16, 24. This for me is like a really mismatching vehicle. It actually would be far better served, I think, to have a damage check of 7 and get a better engine and become like a 5 or a 6 tracked. Not even tracked, because you're not going to get a 5 or a 6 track, but just give it wheels, right? Like, just because if you're just going to be rolling along the edge of the map, just pinging stuff off, to me this is just like if someone said, would you rather have like save 5 points and have an attack warrior helicopter? I'd take that every day of the week over this. So yeah, not great, but it is a fun model. It's like the small ginger child of the Shrek PPC carrier. Apologies, that's a horrible thing to say. But it looks like a PPC, the Shrek PPC carrier, right? Like, look at them. They look almost identical. But one of them is good and one of them is terrible. But yeah, just such a weird and wonderful design. Whoops, there we go. Dropped him. I'm so upset with him. Next up then, we have got the Patton. I always liked the Patton. I played with it on tabletop quite a few times, and I always enjoyed playing with it. Let's see how it then holds up in regards this new rule set. So the first thing to note is the model is lovely. Really, really well done model. I've got I might have quite a few actually Patton metal models. You can't really go wrong with the Patton because it's so square. Maybe why it's called the Patton. And it's it's very classic tanky, but it's got a very interesting gun. It's got like a bit of it's got like a thicker part of the, you can't really see this, but it's got like a thick section of the gun on the top leading out into the turret, which is quite interesting. It looks like a beak almost. I don't know if like General Patton had a big nose or something. That was Wellington, wasn't it? Maybe it should be called the Wellington. Let's have a look at his stats then. First point to note is it's incredibly cheap. 20 points, which sounds wrong to me. It's a 4-track, so it's quick. It's got a TMM of +1, that's fine. It's got a damage check of 11. That can't be right. Someone's made an error there, right? That cannot be a 20. That's just wrong. Because then the damage is 10, which is pretty good, and it shoots at 5, 10, 15. That's like notably better than pretty much, objectively, in terms of like its cost ratio. That's incredible. Like, if you had 100 points, I'd just take 5 of these. They're really, really powerful. And, that's 50 points of damage that you bring into the table for one. It's durable, they're pretty quick, so they can get positioning, and they've got good range. Yep, general pattern, you're our man. Even though you did punch your own troops, or whatever you did, you've got a very good BattleTech tank, so congratulations, sir. That needs checking, though. I think that is significantly undercosted. Try to think of the weapon loadouts on it. It's got an AC-10 and it's got, it looks like an LRM-5 on there as well. I don't know if it's got any other systems. It doesn't look like it does. Yeah, that's so weird. Right, let's do the 2 hover tanks, and these are the last ones to do. And yes, we're coming up to an hour, so that's perfect. Let's do the... where are we? We'll do the J. Edgar first. Interesting point on the J. Edgar that some of you probably do know. Obviously named after J. Edgar Hoover, who was the boss of the FBI for like 800 years or something, back in the 20th century. And he was a famous, allegedly there was a story about J. Edgar Hoover that the mob had pictures of him. I don't know if it was I remember this is like before, homosexuality was decriminalised, which I'm not sure when I'm guessing in the US that happened in the 60s. It happened in Britain in the 60s. But allegedly, the mob had pictures of him like cross-dressing in, the 40s or the 50s in a gay bar or something like that. Something that at the time would have ruined his career. And I remember I can't remember who it was. Some of the original designer said that they called it the J. Edgar because it's got the skirt on there, which is like the skirt for the for a hover tank, which is. I mean, yeah, you can tell all this was designed in the 80s, right? But I quite like. It's quite a nice thing, right? It's got a skirt on. So that's the reason I heard. I don't know if that's true, but interesting if true. If not, then someone tell me why you really think it's called the J. Edgar Hoover. Maybe because it's just really annoying, and I don't think anyone particularly liked J. Edgar Hoover. He was a bit of an interesting character to say the least. It comes in though at 17 points, so it's quite cheap. It's got incredible speed. It's an 11. I don't know, was J. Edgar Hoover known for being quick as well? This is, he liked to go horse racing. He liked to flutter on the horses. Maybe some reflection of that, horse race, I don't know. But incredibly quick. Obviously got a +3 TMM. Damage check of 7, which I actually think is pretty good for this, considering how quick it is and how difficult it is to hit. Damage of 5 times 2, which I also think is pretty good for a 17-pointer. And then range then at 369. So, yeah, like him, he's... I could see, easily bringing 3 or 4 to them to the table to really, really wind up your opponent. That damage ratio, if you 3 of these on tabletop do 30 points of damage between them, they're really quick, they can outmaneuver, they can get rear shots in. So yeah, big fan of the Jag. Very, very nice little model as well. I think very much the smallest of all the hovercraft we've looked at, but it is basically a light hover tank and reflected in that in its speed. And then finally, we've got actually one of my favourite things to play on tabletop, which is, that's not a mech, and it's the Drillson, which is this fellow here. The Drillson, I've got a few of these as metal models, and they worked somewhat as a metal model, but they're on the standees and they're quite heavy, so you've got to be quite careful with them. On these new hovercraft, they've obviously set them directly next to the hex, so they can't fall, which I think is a better way to do it. I'd much prefer that to the putting one of those smaller, transparent standees that come with the old metal miniatures. 18 points straight away. I like that. That's good. It's got a 9 movement, so really, really quick. I mean, it's only 2 points or 2 hexes slower than the J. Edgar. It's got again a TMM of +3, so durability comes in at 7. But again, you're going very quick. Damage of 9, which is good. You know, no problems with that at all. Then it has it's the upgrade really from the J. Edgar, because its range is 5, 10, 15. And that's presumably because of the L laser on there. It's kind of got a similar kind of turret to the Bulldog for the L laser, and it's also got other weapon systems on there as well. But it's that one that's hitting in this rule system, and I like that. I actually prefer that, I think, significantly to the J. Edgar. It's got the speed, same damage ratio, 1 point less of damage, but that's fine because it just hits 1 point of 9, and then it's got that extra range on there, which kind of offsets the. It's slightly slower in terms of its speed, but it still gets that +3 TMM. So, big fan of the drill set. I'm really glad that its rule set has kind of worked its way over in a positive way to the new system. I would have been pretty upset actually if it was terrible, and if it was like that Pike level garbage, that would have been most upsetting. It's such a weird vehicle to put in this system, like just the objectively much worse PPC Shrek carrier, but somebody will find a use for it. Also important to note that I'm just talking about the core standard cards here, so these are like the generic versions. I'm sure there is a variant of the Pike which makes the Shrek look like the the stupid unemployable brother or whatever. It's horses for courses. It depends what area you're in. It depends what variant you're using. So plenty of interesting things going on. That was a long one. We're coming up to an hour there. So I'll finish that here. One more to do in terms of the core boxes, and that is obviously the mech. So that will be a big one. I'm going to leave it there. Just over an hour. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.